This video is an introduction and tutorial to the Model Assistant package for Unity 3D. Now what this package allows you to do is to have subcomponents and create new objects out of those components. And then you can choose the texture and color for those components as well. So let's get started and see how this works. Okay, so here we have a new Unity project with just a very few things in it. Our core Model Assistant objects, we've got our editor scripts and then our primary scripts that you'll be working with. And then we've just got a sword model. So the primary thing that we want to do is to be able to take this sword model and be able to swap through these different objects to be able to build a sword using these different components. We've got 2 different pommels, 2 different grips, 2 different cross guards, and then 3 blades that are all just different lengths. So it's a fairly simple model. The 2 scripts that we're going to use to do that is the MA object and the MA component. The MA object is made up of the components. And so you can see here these scripts are just real simple. They just hold the information. That's it. They don't really do anything with it. They just hold all the information. And then these are the scripts that actually let you do something with the information inside the editor. And then this MA GUI script lets you do some information when you're actually at runtime. And you don't have to use this MA GUI script at runtime. You can set up your own way to equip the components or swap the components out. But what this MA GUI script will do is it will list out all of the possible components and let you swap through them. Okay, so in order to get this running, we need to do a little bit of setup first. What our Model Assistant scripts will do is they will dynamically load the components from our resources folder, which we don't have one yet, so let's go through and build that. So let's create our folder, name it resources, and then inside that, to keep everything neat and tidy, we'll just create our Model Assistant folder. And then since we've got a few things that our Model Assistant can do, we can work with materials, which we'll get into later, and we can work with components. And there's also the shader list, which we will also get into later. We need to keep this nice and tidy and create a new folder, and we'll call it MA Components. Okay. In our MA Components folder will be our possible objects. So in our MA Components folder, the first set of subfolders, that's going to be our possible objects. So let's create a new folder here and we'll name it sword. So this is our object that we want to make to ultimately to be able to make here. And then in our sword we have different slots. So we'll have a slot for blades, we'll have a slot for cross guards, we'll have a slot for grips, and we'll have a slot for pommels. So let's just create a folder for each one of those. Let's see, let's call it, say, blade. And you can set these up however you want. Cross guard. Then grip. And pommel. Alright. So now that we've got that set up, and with these slots, you could set these up however you wanted. You could have a new folder like this, and you could say hilt, and then in your hilt you could have your cross guard, grip, and pommel, or however you want to do it. If you're setting up a character, you could have like upper body and then break that down. It all depends on how you want to be able to, what slots you want to have access to. But in this case, we'll delete that. Maybe I'll come back in and create it later just to show You can do kind of whatever you want as far as how you want to set up your slots down here. These parts, these are pretty solid. I mean, you have to keep these the way they are, and then your objects are in your first subfolder of the MA components. But beyond that, once you get into the object, you can set up your slots however you'd like. So now that we've got these here, let's go through and actually create our components. So let's grab our sword base and we'll throw it out here. And then, so these are going to be all of our components. And right now, they've just got this sword material, which has nothing on it, so let's take that. There we go. And so our sword actually looks like something. And then we'll take our MA component and we'll drop it onto each one of these. And you can see it will automatically build the slots for, and it builds the slots based on these folders here. So since we've got these folders set up, it will build these slots. So here we can see it's got our blade, crossguard, grip, and pommel, and these are checks. So you check, so this is the blade, so we'll go through and we'll check that. But let's just go through and see, and so it's building the slots for that one. So let's go through and we will just add our component script to each one of these. Okay, then as we cycle through all these, it will build the slots for all the accessible slots for these. So let's go through. So that's a blade, that's a blade, that's a blade, that's a crossguard, that's a crossguard, that's a grip, that's also a grip. And you could also have it to where you can select multiple ones of these. You can have it to where, say you've got a character and say you've broken it all up to where you've got the torso and then the left arm and the right arm, and you want to equip a shirt, and your shirt is, say, like a long sleeve shirt. Your long sleeve shirt could take up the torso, the left arm, and the right arm slots. So you've got a lot of flexibility here. Our pommel, and then our pommel. So these are all set up, and then we just want to drag these into here to create little prefabs. Okay. Oh, and also right here our object type, since we've only got sword, but let's say we come into here and we create a new folder and we call it axe. If you come up to this and you go to axe, since there are no slots in that, but so you can switch between the object type there. Okay, so let's take our blade and our blade, crossguard, and I'm sure I've seen a faster way to do this, I just don't remember how to do it off the top of my head, to where you could just drag these out or create them all as prefabs easier, but that works. I just know that you can't select a bunch of them and drag it over, that won't work. But anyway, so now we've got our prefabs and all of our components in them. Now we can either get rid of this or create a new game object, or we could just keep it there. Like, I like to just keep it there so that way when I drop it into the scene or whatever, I can see it. There's an actual visual representation there. Or you could also just create an empty game object and call it sword or whatever. So let's just do one of them now. Oops. Let's take this and then we create our object and we'll just throw that onto there. And it asks us what our mesh renderer type is. So this one, since it's not animated, will be a mesh renderer, but it also has the ability, Model Assistant has the ability to work with skin mesh renderers as well, like I was talking about before, characters and things that will deform. But so this one will be a mesh renderer, and then our object type is not axe, it's sword. Okay, so that goes through and it builds all the slots. And You can see we still have all these things here so that way we can just see them. Once we actually go through and start making equipped objects, it will delete those. So it deletes all that. And let's say we want blade 1, crossguard 1, grip 2, pommel 2. So it goes through and it creates our actual model. And since they're all the same material, it just creates one object. So there you go. That's all there is to that. And so we can come through and we could say, oh, I want the, longer blade, or I want to, swap out the crossguard and play around with that. So that's all it takes to build your sword, or anything else for that matter. So let's do the hilt like we were talking about earlier. Let's say we want another. Let's create a folder. We'll call it hilt. Okay, and in our hilt we've got our. Okay, so say you've got in your sword model you've built some elaborate hilt and everything's all one piece. You want it to all just be one piece, but inside that you've got your other thing. And so you can see as we go through here and click on these, it rebuilds our slot. So it's deleting some of the slots and then rebuilding it with the hilt. So we'll go through, we'll take a look at these, and it goes through and it rebuilds all the slots. And so when we've done that, we have to go back through and say, okay, so this is a crossguard and this is the grip, since it lost that information before. Since we've moved it, that the folder that it was in no longer exists. Whoops, pommel. Alright, we got all these. Grip, grip, crossguard, crossguard. And then these are still in the same folder location, so they're good. So now when we come through here and we look at this, now that information is gone because we've rebuilt it. So we can go through here, and we don't have anything in the hilt folder, anything usable, so there's none right now. But so that just shows you how easy you can change up your slots and make new things. Alright, now let's take a look at the MA GUI object, or not object, script. So let's just drag this out anywhere, doesn't really matter, onto our camera is fine. And so it's got our base directory of assets, resources, MA components, which we've got assets, resources. And so that just shows where we're finding all of our objects. And then our MA game object that we want to see when we actually hit play, because right now, yep, it's angry about this. So let's get this out of here. So when we actually hit play, we don't see anything because my camera's not set up to the right place. Okay, so my sword came in at a scale factor of minuscule. So let's apply that. And let's play with this a second. Alright. So, alright, so now we can actually see that. So this should fix that. So when we go through here and we create, okay, there we go. So now it's actually a reasonable size that we can actually do something with. Alright. So, get lost again. Alright, so here's our sword. Alright. So when we hit play, we've got nothing here. Except angriness. The variable on MA GUI has not been assigned, which we know. So let's say that's here. Okay. So now we've got that. So now when we hit play and we turn this on, So now it will actually, we can see, we can go through and use this, and it automatically builds out everything. And so the view empty just allows us to hide some of the slots or folders that don't have anything in it. For instance, the hilt, which doesn't have anything in it, is hidden until we do this. And so this number here shows all the options, the number of things that you have to equip. So there's 3 different blades. And then there's 0 hilts, so we can hide that. And 2 cross cards, 2 grips, and 2 pommels. And then if we expand this down, we've got the equipped object and the default object. And we've got the same thing over here. I'm going to drop this down. And you can see they're linked. So what the default object is so you can have your model, for instance, if you have a character, and you want to have your base, like naked character, or if you've got a character that has like a tank top on or whatever, and that's what you want to show when they don't have anything equipped, it will go to the default object. So if we come to, say, the blade, and we set our default is blade 1, when we have nothing here, it will be the blade 1. But if we go through and equip anything else, that's what it will use. So first thing the script does, the MA combine script does, is it looks into your equip slot. If there's nothing in your equip slot, then it looks at the default slot. So that lets you have default objects, so that way you don't have to, if you're going to remove article of clothing or whatever, you don't have to re-equip, your nude body or your, tank tops or whatever. It will automatically look for that. So it cuts down on the scripting work that you have to do. Okay, so MA GUI script just builds a whole list of every possible slot and everything that you can use in those slots. And it will also do the materials. And now let's take a look at the materials next. Okay, since we're taking a look at the materials and we want to actually be able to see this thing, I added a directional light and rotated it so you can see it better. Okay, so we have our sword, we have our materials, we have our sword material. This isn't exactly what we're going to be working with. We're going to create an MA material, so a model assistant material, which will help manage our materials and let us make changes to the material that is assigned to this. Okay, so let's start out with, let's create a empty game object. We will name it sword. So this is important. Our MA material must have the same name as the material that we want to manage, that we want to alter. So our material name is sword. So we will name our MA material sword. Now when we add our MA material script, we'll get an error saying, no MA shader list found. Please set up MA shader list. Okay, so we'll just create a new empty game object. And we can name this whatever we like, but I just like MA shader list. And we only need one of these. Okay, and I put the underscore on it so that way it'll be at the top of the list when I put it in my resources MA folder. Now it is important that it goes in the resources.ma folder so that way the scripts know where to find it. Okay, so once we've got this in here, we can delete this and we add our MA shader list. Okay. Now we can add as many shaders to this list as we want to use in the game. So we will add a shader. This is a specular shader, so we will go to our shader list and we will say specular. And then in our specular, we've got the main color, the specular color, the shininess, and then our base texture. In our shader list, this gives us access to all the variables that we want to be able to edit. So even though our shader, our specular shader, has the main color, the specular color, the shininess, and the texture, if we only want to have access to the texture, we only want to be able to edit the texture. Okay, we can come to this and we'll just say texture. That's the only thing that we want to be able to edit. If we want to come in later and add colors, and so we can edit the color variables, that's cool. But right now we're just going to work with a texture. And I believe the main texture variable of the specular shader is called main text. Okay, so you have to know the variable name, the shader's variable name for what it is you want to edit. And I believe the specular shader's main texture variable name within the shader. So here it's called base RBG gloss A, but the shader references it as underscore main text. Okay, so we've got that. So now when we come back to our sword, we can clear all these. We have access to our specular shader. Now if we come into our shader list and we add another one and call it diffuse and just whatever, when we come back to this, it'll automatically build that. So when we go to diffuse, we haven't set up anything here, so there's nothing to access, but we've set up our main text texture variable. So now on our sword we could say, okay, we can list out all the textures that we want to have access to. So we've only got 2, so let's just go through and delete all these. So we've got our base sword, we've got our base sword and our base sword gold. Alright, so now when we have this, that's great. Let's go down to our resources MA. We've got our components. Now we need to create a new folder for our MA materials. Okay, so now we take our sword MA material and we just drop it into our MA materials. Alright, and then we can get rid of this. So now when we go to our sword, we've got our components and we've got our materials. So when we click on materials, now we've got this. Hey, here's our sword material. And then we can click on here and we have access to our textures. Here's our gold and here's our silver. Awesome. So now we can switch back and forth between those. And you could even say you can add as many of these as you like. So the only other texture I have in here is our color picker. So let's go to this. Let's add another one and say we want our color picker. Okay, so then when we go back to our sword and we go to our materials, hey, there's our color picker, and that's obviously not set up for this. So then we can go back to our sword. I don't want that. That's not what that's for. Okay, and you can see here that it creates a instance of our material. So this is different than this, so you don't have to worry about changing your core material. It will, when it generates the sword or whatever object you're generating, it creates its own copy of the material, so you don't have to worry about changing that. Okay, so let's go back to our sword and our shader list. Now we want to be able to play with the colors, so we go to our shader list. Let's get rid of that, we don't need that. And then let's add a color. Alright, so our color variable. I believe the color variable for this is just color. So Now we come back to our sword. And it doesn't show up here, so we need to reload. Just click on that. Alright, so now we add this in. Let's put these back in. Now this color selector, it is a texture, so that when you're in the game and you're using the GUI, the MA GUI, you have access to what colors people can select. So let's just do color picker, so they have access to everything right now. Within the editor, you have access to all the colors. So let's take a look at this real quick. So when we go to our sword and we go to our materials, now we've got this color selector here. So now we can go through and we can change our color. Awesome. Okay, and we can change our material and change our color. Alright, and again, we're not red, we're not, you know. Okay, so then when we have our GUI, so when we go into the, when we actually hit play, so our game object here, let's make sure we've got our sword. Now when we hit play, with our MA GUI, it goes through and it picks up everything we have access to. Now when we hit color here, this is our color picker texture. And we can see that since I just created this new project, our color picker is not readable. And we can fix that. So we go up to our color picker, and we have to say that it's a texture type of advanced. Okay, so texture type advanced. And then we say it is read-write enabled. All right, so there we go, read-write enabled, and that will take care of this. So apply, and then let's go back to our sword. All right, so now we can hit play again, and now when we hit color, there we go. Now we can change our color without issue. Okay. Now we can also change, which when you got a bunch of colors on it, doesn't seem to make a much difference, but we have access to that. Okay. So since we were playing, any changes we make don't affect what it looks like in edit mode, just like anything else. Let's go to our sword material, and let's say you don't want somebody to have access to every color. Say you only want them to have access to black and white gradient. So now when we hit play and we hit our color, now we just have this black and white gradient. And of course, this is not readable. So I don't even know where that is, honestly. Where are you? Default particle. Anyway, so you could have this. I'll just make up a new texture real quick. Oh man, so I just tried to open up Photoshop and create a new color picker thing, just whip something up, and my stupid ATI Radeon card wasn't showing blues as blues, they were black, and so I had to update my drivers. My computer ate itself, so it doesn't look all exactly the same. I apologize. But so anyway, color, our new color picker. Where am I? I'm lost. Okay, so materials. Right, when we hit play, and we've got our color picker. Right, we don't have that issues. So we go to our sword. Okay, and our color selector. Here we go. This is what we're looking for. You can make your color picker look like anything you want. Also, we need this to be advanced, read-write enabled, apply. Right. So we got that. Go here. Here's our color picker. We hit play. Now when we do this, we got our color picker, and we can make it look, however we want, and we can go through and pick our colors. So that allows you to limit the amount of colors. So if you've got characters that, you know, of one race and you only want them to have certain skin tones, or, you know, however, for whatever reason you want, you have that flexibility. Okay, but then at the same time, while you're in this, and you want to select your materials, you're not limited in the editor by what colors you want to pick. So I do believe that that about covers it. So we've gone over setting up our objects, setting up all of our components, okay, setting up our shader list, and setting up our materials. And that is the Model Assistant. And we worked with a regular mesh render here, and you can go through and do the same thing and have access to all the same stuff with a skin mesh render, so a deformable character or your monsters or whatever you want to do. You can go with your slots, you can go as deep as you want, have as many slots and sub-slots as you would like, and it will take care of all of that for you, and you can just go through and really create a much larger variety of objects using, you know, smaller components. Now that we've gone over how all that works, let's actually write a simple script to actually implement a change at runtime. So let's create a new JavaScript. Let's call it MA equip component. And let's just drop this on our main camera like our MA GUI is. We'll just create a button that will equip an object that we can set up. So let's put that there. And let's open it up. Okay, where are we? MA equip component. So let's say we've got a variable of our object, which is a game object, and let's say a variable of our component, which is also a game object. Okay, and since we're making a button, we'll do on GUI, and then let's say if GUI button is a rect of, how does this work? Let's say 400, 10, 100, 30. I think that's how you set up a rectangular button. And then let's say equip, it will say equip. Go on my parentheses. Alright. Let's just make sure that that is where we want it. Alright, close enough, I guess. So let's say 6. Alright, that'll work. Okay, so now this is real easy. Take a look at the top of our combine script. MA combine game object component boolean. So the boolean just says for each slot, every slot we have, so here's the slots as dictated by our folders. We have the equipped and the default locations. So our boolean just asks us, is it the equipped location? So true means it goes into the equipped, and false means it goes into the default. Okay, so that's real easy. So where are we? Right here. So we just say MA combine. We have our object, we have our component, and let's say yes to the equip slot. Okay, we will save that and then take a look at our script. Our object is going to be our sword, and then our component, let's just say it's blade 3, since that's pretty easy. Alright, now we hit play, and when we hit equip, now we have blade 3. So we can have blade 1, blade 3. We have nothing, blade 3. Alright, so now let's say we want to remove an object. That is also really simple. So we've got our, at the top of our combined script, we've got our object, our game object, and we also have the slot, which is a string, and again our equipped, which we went over. So let's create another button. We'll just copy this, put it down here. Let's say this is 700, and we will say remove. Okay, so if we want to remove something from the slot, we need to get the slot. So I put in this button here to where you can get the actual slot name. So you hit the slot name button and it will output to your console the slot. So you can just click on this, and here's our slot for the blade, and just Control C to copy that. And then we can come back into here, and instead of our component, we just put in our string. And now we hit play, and we've got blade 3 and nothing. So that's all it takes to remove an object. And so those are the only two functions you should need to actually get around. And so we can do this on any of the slots as well. There's our hilt, even though there's nothing in it. So you just expand this out, and that's how you can get any of your slot names. So there you go. With just those two simple functions, you should be able to equip and unequip anything you need. I think that about covers it for right now. I hope it works really well for you, and I hope you have a lot of fun with it.